for our city. This is the FC Buffalo Show on 91.3 FM WBNY. We take a look back at the week that was in Blitzers soccer, preview the upcoming week of action, and chat with the personnel from Buffalo's only professional soccer team. Now, live from the WBNY studio, here's your host, Jody Biasi.
Welcome to the FC Buffalo Show here on 91.3 FM WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982. We are joined in studio, as always, by Russ Andolina and on the phone by play-by-play man Ben Sugimoto, coming off the Blitzers 2-0 victory yesterday, Father's Day. I don't even know how to talk right now. This is now a 2-game win streak for FC Buffalo. Guys, how was your Father's Day with the win? You could even add it in there.
Hey, guys. Mine was pretty good. I got to watch a little soccer, got to play a little soccer, got to hang out with my dad for a while, so I was pretty happy with it. Pretty good Father's Day for me.
Yeah, it was great. For those who don't know, Mr. Sugimoto, Ben's dad, is a fixture in the play-by-play booth. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Now, yesterday, FC Buffalo gets a 2-0 victory over Fort Pitt on Father's Day. Game was pretty, I'll say, more entertaining than some in past weeks. What were your guys' first takeaways from the game, now being that FC Buffalo's in the middle of a heated playoff race here?
I thought FC Buffalo caught Fort Pitt at the perfect time to catch Fort Pitt on the schedule. Excuse me. And Fort Pitt had played Friday. Pretty intense game, a 3-2 win over Erie. But you could tell that they had played on Friday almost immediately in Sunday's game against FC Buffalo. Their two center backs looked really heavy-legged. They weren't really connecting on passes. They weren't generating chances. FC Buffalo was all over them. So my major impression was that Fort Pitt was sort of the dog with the tail between its legs on Sunday and just waiting for FC Buffalo to take command of that game. And they did. I mean, they scored in the 9th minute. On that Andrew Ferguson penalty kick. But I know Russ and I were discussing this yesterday. We would have liked to see FC Buffalo really step on their throats and maybe score 2 or 3 in that early going.
Yeah, for sure. And like Ben said, it was great to see them really come out and be dominant. I think the key difference that you saw yesterday compared to 2 weeks ago with Erie was that Buffalo had a lot of time on the ball. And for the type of players they have, guys like Dylan McVane, Eric Dahl, that's key. That's so crucial. And Fort Pitt, feeling that Friday night win over Erie, they wanted to maybe sit back a little bit and be conservative, and Buffalo really took advantage of it and really went for the throat. And finishing was not great, but they did get the 2 goals, and they're right back in the thick of the playoff race now, sitting at 5th, tied with Indiana for that 4th and final spot. So they did well by themselves, and they've set themselves up for an exciting couple next weeks.
Our conversation today would be a little bit different if Brendan Elferry hadn't stopped Andrew Ferguson point blank on a good chance, maybe 15 or 20 minutes after FC Buffalo scored their first goal. The Fort Pitt keeper made just an exceptional save, and say he doesn't make that save, and FC Buffalo goes into the break 2-0, I think the floodgates open a little bit more, and the game is not nearly as close as it ends up being. So this conversation could be a lot different with just maybe one more tidy piece of finishing,
Yeah, and to be fair, Buffalo looked really good yesterday. Like, they were. I'm kind of I keep going back to that but it seemed like a mirror image of what the Erie game was in terms of like the really early goal, and Pitt just never felt like they were going to get back into the game. They had flashes in the second half where they would go and control possession for a bit and maybe get a couple looks at net, but it never felt like Buffalo was going to concede. You had Bobby Ross and Fox Slotemaker back together in the center of defense, and some really good wing play from Julian Akizi. And, Anthony Rosano was back in the lineup, longtime veteran. He combined very well with Kevin Kapic. So all of the strong points that Buffalo has exhibited over the course of the season really were displayed yesterday. And, the 3 points that are all that matters, and they got it.
Yeah, and as Russ brought up earlier, FC Buffalo is now in 5th place in the Midwest of the NPSL. Lansing in 1st, Detroit City in 2nd, Lansing with 17 points, Detroit State with 14. Madison with 13 points, and Indiana Fire with 12 points. Those are your current 4 playoff teams. All have played 7 games. FC Buffalo is sitting in 5th, tied with Indiana Fire in points at 12, also playing 7 games. And then you have AFC Cleveland and the Erie Commodores right behind FC Buffalo. Cleveland at 10, Commodores at 9. Both have games in hand on FC Buffalo. Seeing as now they're in the middle of this huge playoff race, and they really need it. Just how big was yesterday's match in terms of just standings-wise?
Well, they absolutely needed it, and this is something that Russ and I led into the game just shortly before kickoff. It was one of the first things we talked about, how big of the 3 points this was, because looking at their schedule coming up, you have Cleveland, you have Erie, and you have Lansing, in addition to Binghamton, which is not a league game. But you look at those 3 games, all those teams have winning records, and all those teams are going to be vying for a playoff spot. You know, there's no Minnesota Twin Stars. There's no FC Indianas in there coming up. So getting 3 points in a very winnable game on a team playing 2 games in the same weekend was an absolute must. If FC Buffalo either draws or loses yesterday, I think their playoff hopes are just vanished. So they needed the 3 points, and they got the 3 points, which was a good achievement in itself. Do I think they can play better? Yes, I think they can play a lot better than what they played yesterday. But at the same time, it was enough. They got 3 points, and they have the opportunity to get better going forward.
Yeah, it's kind of a you look at the playoff format this year, and the Midwest is a single table. So you have teams like Buffalo. We're not playing some clubs like Madison or what have you. So you kind of get that EPL feeling to things where every game is so important, and every other game that you're not playing is also important, just given results. So it's you don't want to like go to the cliche well too many times, but really every match from this point forward is critical when it comes to the playoffs, because it's just such a traffic jam of clubs at the top of the table right now. Buffalo did well, and they're right in the thick of things, and they could be possibly second this time next week, but there's so many good clubs in the conference, and you really cannot afford to drop any points, especially at home. So,
yeah, and looking forward, almost every one of their games left is a big game. You have AFC Cleveland and Erie, as we mentioned, over your next 2 weeks, who are the teams chasing you from behind, and then you've got Fort Pitt again once, and AFC Cleveland. Of course, you have a big game against Lansing United, who's in first in the Midwest and has looked very, very strong. Let's go back to yesterday's match, though. We'll go touch on the playoff race a little later. Who were some individuals who you would really say stood out and really helped carry the Blitzers to victory yesterday?
It's funny. If you had asked me the same question before the year, all the expectations were around Scott Doney and Eric Dahl, and even some of this coming, from some of the ownership and the coaching staff, and guys that they were really looking forward to see how they'd make an impact. And one guy who wasn't really talked about too much was Brett LaRock, and he's a Bryant University striker, but they weren't quite sure how he was going to fit in. There wasn't a whole lot of familiarity with him in FC Buffalo. They knew that he had some physical gifts, but they didn't know if he would be a finisher or not. But he's done everything that the coaching staff has asked him, but he's also produced. He's scored 3 goals in all competitions, 2 goals in the NPSL, so basically that just means he scored 1 goal against Binghamton. But he's been very effective, and you saw the insurance goal that he scored yesterday, just a real goal scorer's goal, a goal scorer's finish. He kind of faked a pass to the outside and a give and go with Eric Dahl, dropped his shoulder, sprinted right to the top of the 18, and then tucked a shot low inside the left post that Brendan Alfieri, the Fort Pitt goalie, didn't have a chance at. So it was a pure finisher's finish, and if you've watched FC Buffalo at all this year, you haven't seen a whole ton of finishing. So watching that from Brett LaRock was really refreshing, because Buffalo needs goal scoring. That's really what it's going to come down to. Their defense is very good, but where are those goals, where are those chances going to come from? And recently it's been Brett LaRock.
Yeah, 100%. Ben's right on there when it comes to LaRock. Really, he hasn't scored a ton of goals, but it feels like he's popped up in big situations and big moments, and really ensured results, or at least a point on the road. Going back to that Indiana road trip, but yesterday, we saw a ton of chances, and there was some really nice passing movements going forward. Between Julian Akizzi or Anthony Rosano or Kevin Kapic. Really nice, pretty combination play. But everybody, it seemed like, was being very unselfish. And that's usually a good thing. But yesterday, I think we needed somebody to be, selfish and just say, I'm going to finish this chance. And that's what Brett LaRocque did right at the death of the game and, salted the 3 points for Buffalo. So, yeah, LaRocque was very, very noticeable. And also Andrew Coughlin making some really big saves, early on. I remember a sequence where he made a great save when the FC Buffalo back line was caught a little bit flat-footed, and Pitt's forward, James, was able to time his run effectively and get a clear break at goal, but he made that save. And then following up after that, there was a corner kick opportunity where it was very awkwardly placed for Coughlin, for his situation, but he was able to really make the diving save and keep that 1-0 advantage.
One player
Speaking of James, he has one of the best names that we've seen in the NPSL this year. His first name is Archangelo. So,
yes.
I mean, not that it really matters at all, but
that's got to be like we haven't seen anybody like with a name like that. Like Asani's a good first name, but Archangelo is it's elite.
He sounds like a Renaissance painter or something.
Yeah.
One player that stood out to me a little bit, not stood out, but I noticed him a few times, was me and Russ talked to him before the show started, was Eric Dahl. And I noticed there was the one moment towards the end of the match where he had a nice go at it from probably like 25, 30 yards out, and it just missed the net. How do you guys think he's progressed as the season's gone on? He still looks sometimes overmatched due to the fact that he's not really filled out that much, but how do you guys feel that he's progressed since the season's gone on now?
I'll let Ross tackle this one first because I know Russ has a bit of a soccer crush on Eric Dahl, so Russ, take it away.
Yeah, totally. So my detailed scouting of him was his YouTube mixtape before the season started. But no, he's you always like the kind of player that the attacking midfielder, maybe not so much a classical number 10, but really a guy who can pick his head up and really pick a pass and be effective going forward. And like Ben was saying earlier, we kind of looked at the roster and said, well, you've got Dahl, you got Doney, and these guys are going to be able to kind of combine together and really be that decisive attacking combination that will put this team over the hump and really make them competitive with Detroit and what have you. But I think in games such as Erie a couple weeks ago, when you have where space was really at a premium and there's not a lot of skillful moves and it's really more of a physical grinding out type of game. He was not as effective. But yesterday there was just so much space, especially later on with the LaRocque goal. Dahl was the guy going forward with him, and we thought for a second that LaRocque might have laid the ball off for him to finish, but he was obviously selfish in a good way and finished that off. But he was able to really be effective as that center of gravity for the attacking moves forward late in the game when Pitt was committing numbers forward and leaving a lot of space open in that attacking third.
If you missed the game on Sunday at All High, and if you're able to see the highlight of that the second goal, Brett LaRocque's goal, it's definitely worth watching because there was basically it was just an incredible team play, and we talked a little bit about LaRocque finishing it, but the build up to it involved 4 or 5 players. Like Matt Nanu-Ferguson was involved in it. Like Russ said, Dahl was in it. And there's just a lot of combinations, a lot of quick passes, and a lot of exploiting of open spaces in dangerous areas that is something that would sort of happen in snippets before, but didn't really was never quite as connected as it was on that final goal. And if FC Buffalo can build off that and have those kind of extended spells of possession, but not just harmless possession, but possessions that's threatening. And I think there's a really big distinction to be made there. So that's something encouraging because especially late in the game when your legs are heavy, you're maybe a little mentally gassed as well. Being able to combine like that is a sign of a team that's growing together and at least a positive sign of things to come, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah. Other things from yesterday's game, the 2 goals, Andrew Ferguson got the penalty kick in the 9th minute. LaRocque scored in the 87th minute to kind of seal up the win at that point. Walter got a yellow card in the 69th minute, and Coughlin became the winningest. He's now atop the FC Buffalo all-time wins with 6 and clean sheets as well at 4. that ties him with 2010 NPS All-Star Dan Pinero. Anything else you guys want to add on from yesterday's game before we kind of move on here?
Yes, I have. This is going to be a storyline going forward, and something that is probably a little concerning for FC Buffalo. They got hit with the injury bug pretty hard yesterday, and some of it happened before yesterday. You saw Kendall McFadden, who's probably going to be listed in the starting 11, have to pull out. He was getting attended to by a trainer just before the game, and some of the talk around the team was that he was going to start and Bobby Ross was going to come off the bench. Unfortunately, the injury for McFadden, not exactly sure what that injury is. He was getting, I think, his calf or his ankle worked on. But his availability for the future is in question. Dylan McVeigh only played 45 minutes, and if you know the kind of value that Dylan McVeigh brings to the team, you know he's more than a 45-minute player. So I kind of asked a couple questions about that, and he is also was pulled at halftime due to injury. Same thing with Andrew Ferguson. We saw Scott Doney in the stands during the game, and apparently his ankles are giving him trouble, so they're not sure about his availability going forward. And another guy, we saw Jabari Danzy, who came out as a substitute, also leave and have to be subbed off, I don't know, maybe 25 or 30 minutes after he came on due to, it seems like a lingering quad issue. So that's, let's see, McFadden, McVeigh, Andrew Ferguson, Danzy, and Doney. That's 5 guys right there who are pretty pivotal, to FC Buffalo's chances.
Yeah, 100%. And, going on the road, it's just this league is about depth. And, you look at teams like Detroit, and they're able to, say this past weekend where they went down to 10 men, but they came back and they won that game. You have to make sure that the guys coming off the bench can produce. And, luckily Buffalo has seen that, this past weekend with LaRock and, Nanu Ferguson's a very, very quality, starting 11 caliber player. But it's crunch time right now, and it's not going to get any easier. And the games are most likely not going to be as open as we saw, moving forward, especially when you talk about teams like Lansing coming to town or going on the road to Erie and Cleveland. So it's vital that the guys who are in the reserve or on the bench can come in and make an immediate impact, because you're dealing with so many knocks and older guys like Brian Knapp or Kendall McFadden who are central to the team, but are getting up there in age, relatively speaking. They're as old as me, so they're not that young anymore. But no, it's very vital that the bench performs and produces, and we'll see if that happens in the next couple away games.
And it's one thing to remember too that with a lot of these players injured, there's still the opportunity for FC Buffalo to bring more players in, and different players in. And last year we saw Sam DeMello as a guy who was brought in. He's a former St. Lawrence University guy who came in and made an impact. Maybe not immediately, but as the season went along, he was real instrumental in FC Buffalo's offense in those last 2 games of the year, the 2 wins against the Michigan Stars and Detroit City FC. So, I wouldn't rule that out, and maybe that's a question to ask Brendan Murphy. A, how these injuries are going to affect the team going forward, and B, whether or not that means there's going to be personnel moves to keep an eye on coming up. So you may be able to get some insider info from him.
Yeah, and as Ben just mentioned, Brendan Murphy will be on in about 6 minutes now. He'll be calling in the show. Of course, next 2 games are on the road against Cleveland and Erie, and as we know, sometimes you don't always have a full team traveling with you. With these injuries too, what would your guys' expectations be for these next 2 games coming up point wise?
The expectations, I guess, are still 3 points. That's how you have to go into every single game, unfortunately. But Cleveland's a good team this year, and playing in Cleveland is, not as big of a road trip as going to Indiana per se or going to Michigan, but it's still a decent jaunt. It's still 2.5 hours, and this is probably the best Cleveland's been since that 2012 team that went pretty far. Vinny Bell's still there, but they've picked up a handful of foreign players who really seem to be making a difference. Sergio Manizio is a guy who's an attacking midfielder for them who will probably find a place in my NPSL Midwest mid-season best 11. So that's a teaser for that if I ever end up getting to write it, which is possible, I'd say. But Cleveland has a lot of talent. They have a very good goalkeeper who plays for Ohio State, is the starter for the Buckeyes, and there's just a lot of talent, and this is one of the better Cleveland teams I think we've ever seen, honestly.
Yeah, I was able to watch the season opener for Detroit City and in Cleveland because they live stream their games, and Menizio was just, he's so athletic. He's a modern forward. He's big, he's fast, he's quick, he's technical. He's really the full package, and Buffalo's going to have its handful with him when we're talking about the center of defense. So it's, I guess, going back to the original question of like what are expectations? Yeah, you want 3 points, but being realistic, I think if you come out of Cleveland with a point and if you go to Erie and you win, that's probably the bare minimum when it comes to talking about playoffs. So 6 points is obviously what we want to shoot for. But just given, Buffalo's been able to, only lose once this year at home. So they haven't lost on the road just yet. But, road wins are tough. And we just got our first one last weekend against Michigan with that spectacular Kevin Kapic goal. They definitely did well by the standards of an away game, but you never want to say it's going to be an easy 3 points because it's not. It's just the nature of this league, and it's going to be a grind for both games.
Yeah, this is my last comment before I have to go. But I think Russ is right on. Getting 4 points from those two road games would be satisfactory. I would say it's going to be really hard to come away with 6. But either I wouldn't say upsetting Cleveland necessarily, but beating Cleveland in a game that, honestly, FC Buffalo is probably not expected to win. Like, if there was a betting line on it, they probably would not be favored. If they can pull off 3 points there, then I guess 6 is a reality. But I honestly think a draw in Cleveland and beating Erie is probably the best scenario for FC Buffalo, coming away with 4 points. And as Russ said, that would keep them in the thick of the playoff race, and it seems like they're really going to be jockeying for that 4th spot with quite a few teams. And I'm not saying Madison has the 3rd spot clinched up at all, or even Detroit City. Lansing really only seems like the team that is starting to pull away a little bit. But from the 2 spot to the 7th or 8th spot, it's wide open. So getting points from these next 2 games, very, very important.
I'll be very surprised if Lansing and Detroit don't finish 1-2 this year.
Yep, and we're going to have Brendan Murphy coming on in just a few minutes here. Ben, thanks for joining the show. Plan is we'll see you in Cleveland, yes?
If you guys are going, I'll go.
Okay. We should plan that out and go to Cleveland. All right, thanks, Ben, for
See you,
joining us.
Ben.
Yep, thank you.
Probably also should have thanked him for guest hosting for me last week, but we're past that. We're going to take a short break, and we'll have head coach Brendan Murphy when we come back. You're listening to the FC Buffalo Show on 91.3 FM WBNY.
FC Buffalo Soccer is on the air on 91.3 FM WBNY. The Blitzers are on a 2-game road trip in Cleveland and Erie before returning home on July 5th to play Greater Binghamton FC. Opening kickoff is scheduled for 1 o'clock at All High Stadium. FC Buffalo Soccer, sponsored by Rich Products Corporation and brought to you courtesy of 91.3 FM WBNY. FC Buffalo Soccer for our city.
We're back here on the FC Buffalo Show on 91.3 FM WBNY. Joe DiBiase and Russ Andolina in studio, and we are joined on the phone by Coach Brendan Murphy. Brendan, how was your Father's Day?
Oh, it was wonderful. Many thanks to the boys for the 3-point Father's Day present.
Yeah, that always helps. How did you feel the game went as a whole yesterday?
I mean, overall, I can't be upset with the result. I thought, we had some really nice moments of combination play, some great possessions. Defensively, pretty solid most of the game. A couple of moments where we let them in, and Coughlin came up with a huge save on the breakaway, so that was great to see. And then, I'd love to see us put a couple away, but the goals that we scored were really nice. It was great to see Andrew Ferguson step up and nail his penalty, and then Brett LaRock take one late. That was a good finish. So overall, very pleased, and obviously still a lot to work on as well.
Yeah, do you feel like this is a game that really basing on that, and you had so many chances that you really could have won by more than 2 goals even?
I mean, absolutely. I thought there was probably 3 or 4 pretty clear-cut chances that we left on the table, and I think against teams in the future, we're going to have to be. They might make us pay for that. and easily Fort Pitt could have made us pay for that as well. And it's something that's happened throughout the course of the year that we've been working on and trying to find ways around.
Hey, Coach. So, I was speaking with, Joe and Ben earlier about just my impression of the game was there was a lot more room to operate in terms of space compared to, say, the Erie game a couple weeks ago. Not a lot of us were able to see, what happened on the road against Michigan. Do you think that there was, the team responds to space better in terms of, like physical battles, or, do you see a lot of similarities between what happened yesterday and what happened last weekend on the road against Michigan?
A couple major differences that I saw were, first and foremost, the fact that when we came out against Erie, we just did not have the energy. And, I spoke to the boys about it, and they all basically agreed that we came out flat. And that's what they were hoping for, and basically gave them the dream scenario where they could score a goal 3 minutes into the game and then sit on the game the rest of the game. Their goalkeeper literally sitting down on the field to change the shoes.
Yeah.
And against Michigan, we came out with a lot more energy, and that right there, that allowed us to dictate the tempo of the game and then created the space. And I think with Fort Pitt, we did the same. We came out with some energy, put some nice combination plays together, established the tempo, and that helped us to create the space that we were able to work with.
So, excuse me. I was very impressed with Andrew Ferguson early on. He's not the most imposing physical figure. However, he did a fantastic job, in my opinion, of really holding up the ball well and being sort of a target striker with his back to goal, and really making a lot of the combination play that you mentioned happen. Do you see him going forward as your first choice? I know injuries are a factor as well, but were you pleased enough with his performance as a starting center forward yesterday to say that he's your guy going forward?
Andrew's been great wherever we put him. He's played as a left winger, he's played up top, he's played as an up 10, and he's played as a defending center mid. I think he's the type of player that he can flourish wherever he goes, but I'll say that I thought he's probably one of our best options up top. I'm trying to get our best players on the field with the right mix of guys that are going to, allow us to be successful. And sometimes it's going to be up top, sometimes it's going to be wide for him, but definitely seeing the way he plays on Sunday gives me a lot of confidence and hope for him in that spot going forward.
Yeah. One player that a lot of people didn't see a lot of things coming into the season with was Brett LaRocque, and he had a great game yesterday, scored a goal. How do you feel his progression has been doing as the season's gone on now?
I think he started to find his comfort level with the group and with the level of play. And, he's always been a spark plug, and, you get him in the game and he's going to run around and fly around, and he's going to get behind the defense. He's going to put pressure on the keeper when he gets it, put pressure on the center back. And we've always been using him as a winger, but just with the circumstances last night, it seemed like the right move to put him up top, and, he really thrived up there. I thought the added space of working in the middle of the field with his pace and just the amount of pressure he was putting on the center backs, it really worked to his advantage. And he's a finisher. He's a sniper. He's been that way all year. Even in practice, he scores a ton of goals. So anytime you get him a chance, he's going to hit the target. Keepers have made some great saves on him, too. So he's one to watch going forward for sure.
One of the players that has kind of stood out to me just because he brings a different dimension. I think throughout the history of this club, we've had a lot of really good central midfielders and guys who bring a lot of energy to the center of the park and are effective. But Dylan McVeigh has really stood out to me, just given his composure and his ability to play out of pressure and just really make it look effortless, kind of in a Michael Bradley type mold. What are your thoughts on his play so far this season?
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison, actually. He's very consistent, smooth on the ball, and able to get himself out of tight situations and also goes forward a lot. He's not afraid to go forward and try to play into a striker, try to play into Dahl, his teammate, as number 10, in those tight spaces, and then he moves quickly and gets it back. And he set up Kendall on the goal in Michigan and really created the space that Kendall had. And it was a nice shot and nice finish for him, but Dylan McBain really was the one who set that up. And yeah, I can't say enough about him. He's been excellent on all accounts. Defensively, in the air, he's a threat on corner kicks, and he does the work in there too. So great to have him.
Brennan, in some years past, you've had some great players that put up huge numbers like Russ Cicerone and others. Do you feel like this is a more well-balanced team than maybe in years past where you're relying on maybe several scorers rather than just one guy to provide most of your offense?
I would say so, yeah. I mean, it's great to see the balanced scoring going across the board with a number of guys with 2 goals. And, basically we'll take it however we can get it. I'd love to see somebody step up and be the leading scorer and just know that this is the guy that's going to finish every time he's in the box, every time he's around the box. But it's great to have a number of guys doing that as well. So, and you don't really know who's the number one guy to mark. Whereas last year, I think it was pretty clear who was the number one guy that he had to deal with, and makes you a little bit more one-dimensional. And while I missed that potential attacking threat at any moment, to have guys from every position, from the back to the midfield to the wingers to the forwards scoring goals, that adds a lot to our team, I think.
Coach, going back to kind of the Dylan McVain, narrative, he has experience with the Real Salt Lake Academy, as well as Kevin Kapik, with New York Red Bulls, and Jabari Danzy within the Chicago Fire program out in Indiana. Do you see a lot? Is there any kind of noticeable differences? Maybe not just in terms of straight quality, but do you see the effects of these guys going through these professional academies or getting that type of coaching experience, or getting that type of management from a professional setup? Do they bring anything that's different from what you've seen in the past, or how does that affect the club as a whole?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with the word you said, professionalism. And they just bring a professionalism that Dylan McBain made sacrifices where he left his family at 14 years old, spent 2 years at Real Salt Lake just by himself, had to figure out a lot. And, not only his maturity, but soccer-wise, just getting thrown into the mix with some of the best players in the country. And at a young age, missing high school, and that's a lot of sacrifices to make. So he really respects this game and respects the process and is able to, function in a highly pressured environment because he's been doing it since he was 14 years old. And the same for Kevin Kapik. I mean, just the consistency and, you just know when the ball hits his foot, it's going to stick. He's going to make the right decision. He's going to be in the right position defensively. And that's just innate almost. It's ingrained in him from years of coaching and being at a high level, playing with players that are testing him in practice every day. And Jabari as well, although we haven't got the chance to see it, he's been hampered by the hamstring all year, and it's been tough on him for sure. But the pace he has and the quality when he gets into a rhythm it's definitely great to see. And to have 3 of those guys makes us want more for sure going forward, as many as we can get.
FC Buffalo coach Brendan Murphy here on the FC Buffalo Show on 91.3 FM WBNY. Brendan, you've got a big road trip coming up against AFC Cleveland and the Erie Commodores after that. Some players have been banged up as of late. Do you see any sort of depleted roster for the next few games coming up, knowing that you're going on the road?
I mean, that's the thing with the NPSL. It's injuries, it's other commitments and conflicts that come up. Unfortunately, it's not a professional club, so we don't have a full monopoly on these guys' time. But that's why we have the roster that we do, and the lineups that we've been using, have been relatively successful for the most part, even if there's guys that are banged up. And, we've had rotation within the lineup for form, as well as injuries, as well as other conflicts, and also just to get a different flavor and a different mix in there. So, yeah, we will have some guys that will be missing the script, probably some due to injury and others due to conflict. But I'm confident with the group that we have that we'll be able to put a good squad out there, and it's going to be how do we perform on the day. Cleveland is a very good team, and obviously Erie has shown their ability to handle their business as well, even though they've struggled recently. Neither one of those teams can be underestimated, and I certainly understand the weight of that Cleveland game, not just with the league on the line, but the Rust Belt Trophy, and what that means to the fans. So we'll put a good spot out there. It's just going to be on execution and do we come to play. That's my job.
So, talking about that upcoming Cleveland game, and it's obviously so important in terms of the playoff race, but are there any key points that you're focusing on? I know, Cleveland, we were talking about earlier, has some really good attacking quality and guys like Sergio Minizio and Vinny Bell. Is there any specific point that you're trying to hammer home to the team before you take that trip next weekend?
I mean, we're going to definitely do some defensive work this week to make sure that we're shored up and we understand our roles and responsibilities. But it's pretty much been a process from the beginning of the year to the end of trying to get these guys on the same page on all sides of the ball. How do we move the ball? And decision making is going to be huge. I think that's been something that has been a sticking point for us a little bit with decisions in the different thirds of the field and what we're going to do with the ball and what are we trying to do. And at times maybe taking too many risks in the back and in the midfield. But there's also been some great moments of possession that we've built through the field, and that's what we want to be able to do, build through the three-thirds as much as possible, because I think that's where we're at our best when we're switching the point of attack. So, trying to hit the same teams that we've been hitting and just get sharper, build the chemistry. As you know, it's a quick season and short turnaround between college season, these guys getting back into town. So we're still building chemistry, even though we're 8 games into the season here, 7 games into the season. So continuing with the same themes, but definitely working on shoring up defensively to deal with those attacking threats that you mentioned.
As we near a close on the interview here with Brendan Murphy on the FC Buffalo Show, Brendan, I have one more question for you. How thrilled would you really be if you were able to get 6 points over these next 2 games against Cleveland and Erie?
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal, and I would be very thrilled. That would be the word to describe it. I would be thrilled for sure. Now, it's going to take a lot of hard work, and we're going to approach each game one at a time as an individual battle. I think once we start looking ahead and we start thinking what we should do or could do, that's when we get into trouble. So I just know we need to prepare ourselves for a very difficult opponent. I'm sure they'll be well coached and well organized, and we know the quality they have on the field. So it's going to be a battle, and these guys just have to come to play, and I have to come to coach and be ready to do our jobs and hopefully come out on top.
One more question, Coach. So, Kendall McFadden, a little bit knocked up in terms of injuries, but if you do have him available, going forward, I know he's featured in defense, but he did start at forward, if I'm not mistaken, against Michigan on the road. If he is a factor in the lineup going forward, where do you see him playing?
Well, what's great about Kendall is he's a pro, and he's willing to play wherever we need him. He was great. He did a good job up top. He finished, and that's something that we've lacked from our center forward. And so, all credit to him on that, but he's also been a stalwart at the back, very athletic, deals with a lot of, cleans up a lot of mistakes, and, it's tough to move him out of there. So it's going to depend on personnel, as always, and if we find the rhythm with Andrew Ferguson up top, then, Kendall can stay in the back. But if we're looking for a spark, or if Andrew's not available on that day or banged up, Kendall's always an option up top.
All right. Well, Brendan, we want to thank you for joining the show, and best of luck against AFC Cleveland and with the rest of the season.
Well, I want to thank you guys for all the coverage and for the great job on the play-by-plays and doing the show every week. I think it's awesome for the community and definitely for the club, so I appreciate it for sure.
Thank you, Coach.
Yeah, thank you. It's greatly appreciated. All right, have a nice rest of your day.
Take care.
All right, take care.
That was Coach Brendan Murphy here on the FC Buffalo Show here on WBNY. We're going to take one more quick short break, and then we're going to come back and wrap up the show with what went on in the rest of the NPSL and with FC Buffalo, of course. We'll be back here on the FC Buffalo Show on WBNY. Back here on the FC Buffalo Show on 91.3 FM WBNY. Joe DiBiase, Russ Andolina in studio. There were a lot of out-of-town games during this yesterday, even for the NPSL. Lansing United got a victory over Detroit City over Minnesota United Reserves, crushed them. There were a lot of other games. Russ, were there any big games playoff-wise that you really took a lot of impact into?
For Buffalo, at least, the one that kind of stood out for me was the Indiana Fire. They beat Erie yesterday, so it's tough because every game is important, but in terms of the results for Buffalo, that kind of kept them on that right at that bubble up until like 9 o'clock last night. I believe Buffalo was around second place, but results pushed them down a bit to the fifth. So they're right there. They're right on the verge of that last playoff spot. But that Indiana win, while it didn't exactly put Buffalo in a great spot, it did, put Erie back a bit, which is helpful. So, you got to pick your spots where you can when it comes to out of town scores, and what you want to see happen. But it's all, I guess at the very least you can say that Buffalo does have their destiny back in their own hands for these next two games, and 6 points, they'll be in fine form. So it's right there for them to take it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and those scores, Lansing United was 4-0 over Minnesota United Reserves. FC Indiana tied the Cincinnati Saints 1-1, and Indiana Fire, as we just mentioned, defeated the Erie Commodores for 4-1 victory, and Madison beat the Michigan Stars 1-0. So that's your Midwest scores from yesterday. Do any of these results really put any of the teams above FC Buffalo really behind them, where you think they can really get that playoff spot?
To be honest, not really. I mean, there's, you take a look at the table, and, you have, Erie's at 9 points and Cleveland's at 10. So, worst case scenario for Buffalo, if they say, if they beat Cleveland or if they drop a game to Erie, they'll still be around that 4 to 7 range. But it's just so tight. There really isn't a lot of teams that are really out of it. The only team that really is kind of down and out would be the Minnesota Twin Stars. They're sitting on 1 point for the season so far. But you have to take everything kind of with a grain of salt when it comes to results, because the for one thing, the schedule's unbalanced. So
right,
not every team is going to be playing every team equally in the conference.
For instance, like FC Buffalo doesn't play Minnesota this
exactly
year.
Right, and or Madison for that matter,
yeah.
Which they're in third right now. So there's not an opportunity to get over them head to head, but you got to hope that they maybe fall off the pace a bit. So it's just about taking care of your own business at this point. We've got a few more weeks left in the season. Cleveland comes here, Lansing comes here. That'll be a huge game, just because they're, they were excellent out of the gate in their first season last year. They draw on a lot of Michigan State guys, and that part of Michigan is just a powerhouse for talent. So they've been able to draw off that very well, and they've become a regional power. And it looks like I said earlier, between them and Detroit, they're going to be 1-2. I'd be very surprised if they don't finish in those one of those two spots. So, it's really about taking care of your own business and making sure you've got the 3 and the 4 spot in your sights at the very least.
If they were able to get into that 4 spot, how likely do you think it would be that they would be able to defeat either Detroit City or Michigan?
So that's the problem,
Lansing,
right?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's the tough part. The way, for some of our listeners who might not know, the way that the NPSL Midwest works is, so you have your top 4 teams make the playoffs, and the first place team, the regular season champion or the Shield champion, whatever you want to call them, they get right of first refusal on hosting of the entire playoffs. So back in 2013, Buffalo made the playoffs, and Detroit City finished first in the conference. So Detroit City was able to host that tournament. So Buffalo had to travel along with Erie, and I forget who the fourth team was. But, if you're talking about Buffalo making the fourth seed, they're playing that first team. If it's Lansing, if it's Detroit, if it's Madison by some chance, they're playing the first team overall at home. So it's definitely an uphill battle. So, you always want to shoot for as high as you possibly can. Maybe get that third or second seed to maybe take the non-home team first round, and then try to get over whoever makes it out of that 4-1 game. On the final day.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, in the NPSL, that team who finishes first has right of refusal to host. And at this moment, really, the three teams you might think it might be were Lansing, Detroit City, and Madison. All three are going to. That's a pretty lengthy road trip for FC Buffalo, no matter who you're playing. If you had to put odds on it, how likely do you think is they make the playoffs?
Oh, that's a tough question. To be perfectly honest, I like the club this year. I think that they're, like Coach said, they're a lot more balanced than they were. I think you have starting caliber players across the 18, and the only caveat to that is the rest of the Midwest is getting as good, if not better. So it's really going to be a squeaker when it comes to those last two spots, I think. Depending on what happens against Cleveland, like if they can come out of Cleveland with a result, I'd feel pretty confident about their chances going forward, because you get teams like you get teams like Cleveland and Lansing, but you get them at home. So if they can come out of this road swing with 4 points, then I think it'd be very likely that they make the playoffs.
All right. And as we come to a near close here on the FC Buffalo show, I have one more question for you. Who would your mid-season MVP be at this point?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It's about mid-season.
Yeah. I think that's a fair ask. Wow, that's a really tough one.
Especially since it's more of like a balanced team, as we said.
Yeah,
before.
right. I mean, there really hasn't been anybody who's like taken the season by the throat. Like, Julian Kesey had some really nice looks early in the season, and Brett LaRocque has been a great player off the bench. In terms of when the team is playing its best, I think Dylan McVane has been very, very sharp, and I really like watching him play, and I like what he brings to the club, and I think he's a type of player that we really haven't seen. Russ Cicerone is explosive and incredible, and an attacking dynamo, but McVane has been understatedly good in a way that I think really enables a team to play really nice soccer. So, gun to my head, I would say McVane. I think he's been at least my favorite so far in terms of bringing a certain skill set and enabling the team to play well to the table.
Okay. Well, that about does it for us here on the FC Buffalo show. Next game's coming up. I think at this point we'll be bringing you the AFC Cleveland game. That is Saturday at 7 o'clock. That'll be on 91.3 FM WBNY, it looks like at this point. We will definitely be here for the Erie game. That is July 3rd. That is a Friday. That'll be at 7 p.m. And then, of course, we're back home at Robert E. Rich All-High Stadium for the July 5th game against Greater Binghamton FC. That is a friendly. That is not a league game. And then they close out the season against Lansing at home and AFC Cleveland. So really the only game we will not be bringing you here on 91.3, it looks like, is the away game at Fort Pitt, which is not till July 12th. So we'll be bringing you a lot of soccer here on the air. We'll be back next Monday at 6 o'clock. Check out me on Twitter at DiBiase WBNY. Check out the FC Buffalo account at FC Buffalo. And follow Russ at RJ Andolina, ANDOLINA.
You got
right?
it. Yep.
Good. So we'll be back next Monday at 6 o'clock. Thank you for listening to the new... Wow. Almost had it.
FC Buffalo.
Welcome to... Okay. I'm just going to finish the show right here. Thank you for listening to the FC Buffalo Show. You've been listening to 91.3 FM WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative since 1982.